Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time it had no hope. Free to come and free to go. Free to come and free to go. Open up the book of stars. Open up the
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Karmic Evolutions Astrologically Speaking. I'm your host, SHERI Horn Hasan of Karmic Evolution Astrology, and I'm coming to you on July 14th, 2022 from Contact Talk Radio. Just a quick reminder that this show aims to bring you the truth about astrology and your soul's karmic evolution. First, before I get to this week's Astro News, you can use my usual housekeeping stuff, which is to tell you that you can listen to this podcast anytime by simply going to my website at karmicevolution.com and clicking on the upper right-hand portion of the banner labeled podcast. From there, you can scroll down the page and hear the most recent show, either live or recorded, and or search the archive listings for past shows you might have missed or to which you'd like to listen again. Just want to let you know, I found out just today that people are having trouble accessing the live show from the website page. So my apologies to everyone. It's a technical glitch. And I promise you I'll have that fixed up by next week. So if not before, like tomorrow, like now, you know. Anyway, my apologies. So please bear with me. But as soon as this is posted, which it will be shortly, you'll be able to hear it and then also hear the live show next week without any problems. So, meanwhile, while you're on the podcast page, you'll now see a banner sign that says how to keep your sun sign happy. And that's a free downloadable document which contains friendly advice for every sun sign from renowned astrologer and one of my mentors, Stephen Forrest, about what each sun sign needs, well, to be happy. It's based on an interview I did with Steve a couple of years ago about depression in the chart, and he's given me permission to distribute it more widely with a short giveaway. And yes, it will sign you up for my Conversations about Consciousness astrology newsletter, but you can, of course, unsubscribe anytime. So be sure to grab it when you listen to this podcast, whether you do so again live or after the fact. And please enjoy some of Stephen Forrest's words of astrological wisdom. Separately, you can always follow me on my Facebook page, which is Karmic Evolution for Your Soul, where you can read all of my astrologically oriented posts. And finally, oh, that was separately. I don't know if I said finally or separately. Anyway, I'm continuing to offer my 1-hour discounted Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading to listeners only for only $99. So if you're interested in astrology and want to learn more about the true meaning of your individual birth chart, which, as many of you know, is essentially a snapshot of the exact position of the planets at the precise moment and location of your birth, because you want to learn what this horoscope can reveal about you and how, when you use it as a tool for soul growth, a Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading can be tremendously helpful. This is especially true if you'd like to learn your soul's true purpose and how to move towards your highest destiny in this lifetime. If you'd like to identify patterns of behavior, which I've come to call soul conditioning, that originated either early in this lifetime or during past lives, that may be negatively affecting now your current relationships, your career or career choices, finances, and or health. And again, identify these patterns of behavior because they may no longer serve your soul's karmic journey forward through this lifetime. You can also gain insights into what's tripped you up in the past and how to entertain new perspectives in order to gain greater awareness through astrological insight that can bring greater happiness and satisfaction into your life moving forward. So all this is easy when you take advantage of my 1-hour discounted Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading for only $99. You'll find easy access to this offer on my website at karmicevolution.com/karmic99. And as I love to say, at almost half the regular price, conscious awareness has never been so easy or so affordable. Okay, so now let's get into this week's Astro news you can use. Let's talk first about yesterday's Capricorn Full Moon, which occurred at 21 degrees, 21 minutes of this Saturn-ruled sign at 11:38 a.m. Pacific Time and 2:38 p.m. Eastern Time on July 13th. So basically, this lunation invites us, and remember, we're still under its energies most strongly within 48 hours after the lunation perfects, and a little less so, but still under its auspices as it encourages us theme-wise during the rest of the waning monthly lunar cycle, which in this case began with June 28th Cancer new moon and ends with the advent of the next new moon in Leo on July 28th. So if we planted seeds at the Cancer new moon to increase our ability to listen to our intuition as a way to strengthen our confidence in our decisions, actions, and reactions, meaning they're not decided solely on rational, empirically based logic, but rather on the quote-unquote logic of the feminine divine cycles of nature strongly ruled by the Cancer moon, then now we may release any negative tendencies associated with the Cancer archetype, also known as its shadow side. Now, another way to put that, which I'll get into in a minute, is to the Capricorn full moon is advising, as a good Capricorn, Saturn-ruled Capricorn would, the Cancer child in us is advising our inner child to let go of past hurts, or let go of dealing with past hurts in a less than mature way, and to grow up or mature, as I'll get into in a minute, and deal with it in ways that can actually have practical solutions to healing. Now, as we know, a full moon, and that's any full moon, occurs when the moon opposes the sun, and thus it reflects that sun's light back to us here on Earth. Therefore, we can see revealed, or all lit up by the full moon, the darker nature of the zodiacal archetype the sun is transiting through at that moment in time. Thus, we plant our monthly seeds, set our monthly intentions at the new moon, which of course brings both the sun and moon together in the same archetypal sign, and focus on increasing all of the positive traits of that particular new moon zodiacal archetype. At the full moon, however, with the moon in opposition to that same sun present at the new moon, meaning the sun stays in the same sun sign at the full moon that it was at the new moon, but the moon, of course, has moved halfway around and is opposing it from its opposite polarity 2 weeks later. So that's how we're able to identify the flaws, the negatives, or the shadow side behaviors or beliefs, and work to release these of the archetypal sun sign as the monthly lunar cycle wanes and the next new moon brings a new zodiacal archetype into play, as I mentioned. So at this Cancer new moon, we sought to plant seeds allowing us to intuitively learn to recognize the signs, signals, and inherent wisdom of the natural cycles of our own physical bodies. And I spoke about this ad nauseum on my show last week and the week before. Last week was a repeat because I was busy with jury duty. Anyway, these natural cycles have been written in stone through the history of mankind, and they include things like the empirically provable knowledge that the sun rises and sets daily, while it's the moon which rules the ebb and flow of the emotional tides of our lives. So it's important to remember also that the Cancer new moon squared Jupiter in Aries. That was one of the biggest aspects on June 28th, calling us to pay attention to where we may be righteously overconfident about our conscious beliefs that morality and law and things of that nature associated with Jupiter, the Jupiterian archetype, must triumph over intuition, because such moral beliefs might indicate where we lack confidence in our inner intuitive radar's ability to connect to that wisdom of our physical bodies and the natural cycles of the universe's feminine divine, which have to do with birth, childhood, puberty, maidenhood, motherhood, midlife, elder wise grandmother energy, and eventually death. And remember, the feminine divine is present in every human, just to different extent. So this is the anima, not it's specifically connected to females through the issue of procreation. But that doesn't exclude males either, because we need their seed to procreate, right? So I'm not making this about gender. That's my point. Rather, it's about archetypes. So at that Cancer new moon, we were tasked with reconciling our beliefs or philosophies about life with our intuitive knowledge, dare I say wisdom, yes, I dare, about what direction our life should take. And now, as the Capricorn full moon, which perfected yesterday, begins its waning journey, we may look at what doesn't work for us vis-a-vis any negative manifestations of the Cancer archetype. So because the Cancer archetype represents sensitivity, and I've said this before, but astrologer Stephen Forrest likes to say, take the dial on sensitive and turn it up to maximum when you're referring to Cancer energy. And Cancer energy tends to retreat when it feels emotionally hurt. The metaphor of the crab, which is nothing but a tasty morsel to the gulls circling the seashore above, developing a tough shell to protect itself, pretty much sums up how Cancer deals with such pain or fear, right? However, this shell, this protective shell, while it serves a positive protective purpose to keep the tender crab, that tiny little morsel, safe from predators, can work against us on the emotional level when it becomes a hiding place from our own feelings. And one of the easiest ways to keep our feelings locked away inside is by tending to the emotional hurts of others. Thus, the Cancer archetype's defense mechanism against exposing itself to potential pain lies in the oft-used deflection away from self-compassion and toward the compassionate nurturing of others. Anyone tasked with anyone tasked with the I lost my place. Boy, what a day. Here we go. Anyone tasked with caretaking, right? In whatever form. Many of us who are parents understand that. Many of us who have aging parents understand that. Many of us who have ill or disabled or otherwise impaired, I guess I'll use that word, but people in our lives who need assistance. We understand that a certain amount of sacrifice of our own needs is necessary to do the caretaking job well. However, every rose has its thorn. So while the Cancer new moon asked us to turn our exquisitely intuitive sensitivity, our high attunement to others' pain and emotional needs towards ourselves for a change, now the Capricorn full moon invites us to release any resistance to remaining mired in any uber sensitivities that cause us to continue to hide and instead to take responsibility for our feelings, for our thoughts, our beliefs, and our words. And in doing so, we heed the Capricorn full moon's call to venture out of our emotional shell, because through recognizing we deserve compassion as much as do others, we can now develop a tougher, more mature method of dealing with our pain. So again, if we planted seeds at the Cancer new moon on June 28th to help us increase our self-compassion for whatever past slings and arrows of emotional misfortune caused us pain, both during this lifetime and karmically, it's now we might look at why we deflect attention from our own suffering. In this way, when we shine a revealing light on the motivations of our reactions to hurt, we become responsible for our own healing, rather than letting our hurt remain hidden where it can fester and often unconsciously drive our actions, reactions, and decisions in life. So the Capricorn full moon reminds us that it's our responsibility to ourselves that can allow us to develop enough self-compassion to reveal our hurts and painful experiences, and to risk doing so without fear of retribution. The Capricorn moon mentors the Cancer sun now, providing it with the wherewithal to rise up, take the reins, and drive us toward our future destiny through actionable planning with our heads held high. So instead of hiding when we're hurt, the Capricorn moon advises the Cancer to drop its reticence, become seen and known without shame, blame, or fear of judgment, and in that way begin to integrate our emotional pain with a plan for healing. And such a plan creates a foundation for us to feel the fear but do it anyway. It's from such a foundation that we might stabilize our ladder to success on solid enough emotional ground to enable us to climb out of our Cancerian self-protective shell. And once we begin, we can then become brave enough to be seen in public where, by exposing our pain, we begin to heal through the outer world's acknowledgement, acceptance, and compassion about that pain. So developing a stronger foundation of responsibility to self cannot be accomplished without hard work. So says the Capricorn moon. No time to coddle yourself or remain fearfully hidden under the covers in the fetal position. So as mentioned, all full moons reflect the light of the sun back onto itself and thus reveal the zodiacal sun's flaws, also known as its archetypal shadow side. And in the case of Cancer, it's that whiny, self-indulgent, it hurts so bad I can hardly stand it, uber sensitivity that can lead to all sorts of negative fear-based behavior patterns, including, as I mentioned above, shame, which is very strongly associated often with Cancer, which in and of itself often causes us to hide our feelings from others, right? I'm so ashamed. I didn't mean to do that. Why did I let that happen? How could I have done that? How could he have thought this and I, allowed that, etc., etc. I mean, I do think, I am, given what's happening now, and I'm going to talk about the Capricorn full moon's conjunction, the moon's conjunction to Pluto, and the growing sense of empowerment, but also obsession. This so strongly relates to the issue that the cycle of the new moon in Cancer started, which is about our physical bodies and our natural intuition to them, and these cycles that I mentioned of things that include pregnancy and birth. So just the issue of abortion, who had one, why they had one, how long they kept it secret. This Capricorn full moon, I think at its culmination, right, has shown us how many women have come out into the open to talk about what they formerly kept secret. And we have a reason for doing that, which I'll get into later. There's also the recent story of this 10-year-old child in Ohio who was taken across state borders since Ohio passed anti-abortion legislation after the Supreme Court abolished the right of women to make choices about their own bodies, or I should say, the right of females to make choices about their own bodies. It's that this young girl was denigrated, shamed, etc., until yesterday when her alleged rapist confessed. And I had said something on Facebook. I was like, in response to somebody's posting, and I was like, wow, all of these people on Fox News and elsewhere who were basically blaming this 10-year-old, or the anti-abortionists who are saying, oh, she can't have an abortion. What hubris, right? What lack of compassion for someone who, I am sorry, but did not get pregnant on her own. As far as I know, other than being a surrogate, carrying someone else's seed, that's not really possible. Self-impregnation is not impossible, especially by a 10-year-old, okay? So this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about shame. It's just one of the examples that's so brightly lit up on our screens every single day, especially over the past month and a half, since the Supreme Court decision came down. Which I think was June 24th, which was just a few days before the Cancer new moon. Anyway, the problem is that the shame originates from, if people knew what we were thinking or what we've done, they might judge us, or worse yet, they'll run away screaming, which means, of course, we'd end up abandoned, which is another large moon theme, right? So this Capricorn full moon says, time to grow up. Put your big girl pants on and face the world. Feel the fear and take the necessary steps to exit its cave as an act of self-nurturing. Success lies with facing the world without shame or blame and building upon that a strong foundational sense of inner emotional security. Only then are we able to climb that ladder toward the true kind of wisdom that tells us, that the Capricorn archetype offers. And here's a hint for you all. Capricorn's not really about the material trappings of quote-unquote success. Rather, it's about laying down a strong, emotionally secure base that lends confidence to our decisions, our actions, and our reactions, many of which occur on the emotional level. So no hiding, no second guessing, no doubting our intuitive instincts, rather integrating our emotional intuition, particularly around the physical body and these natural cycles of nature, with sound logic and rational ideas into concretely workable plans. Now, we'll probably see more of that when we see the Capricorn new moon, which won't be until next December, right? Where we again bring the moon and the sun together in the sign of Capricorn. So we've got the emotions of the moon and the intuition of the moon, and yet the workable logic and empirical factual nature of the sun integrating. So we plant a new seed at that time to make a plan. But in other words, in terms of the Capricorn full moon, coming out emotionally allows us to define ourselves in the world as living, breathing, sensitive, compassionate, nurturing individuals who view emotional exposure as a sign of strength, not one of weakness. There's nothing weak about that, says the wise Capricorn moon. So we may be further empowered to release our tendency to hide our emotions since the Capricorn moon's approaching its union with Pluto and imbuing this lunation with deep emotional intensity. And this intensity may drive us to act on our emotions, or, because it's in Capricorn, develop a plan to do so rather than continuing to keep them silently hidden. Now, Most of us can't fail to remember how the perfection of the square by Mars and Aries to Pluto and Capricorn on July 1st filled our airwaves with news of mass shootings and other violent acts. And I'd mentioned before then how violent that potential aspect can be when it manifests, and that one need only look at the statistics for the few days before and after July 1st to confirm this. Now, I'd venture to say that with this Capricorn Moon Pluto conjunction, which actually did perfect a few hours after the exact lunation last night on July 1st, July 13th on the West Coast and early this morning on the East Coast, that what we see forming here, especially since the Cancer Sun conjoins Mercury on July 16th, and Mercury opposes Pluto exact on July 18th, and the Sun opposes Pluto exact on July 19th, what we see forming here is a recipe for a super strong focus triggered by such violence that now may begin to border on obsession. And meanwhile, Mercury at this Capricorn new moon on July 13th was and still is now approaching its union with the Cancer Sun, which perfects as noted on July 16th. So a Mercury Sun conjunction often denotes that a message will be forthcoming from an authority figure. The Sun in traditional astrology represents the king or ruler, an elected statesman or woman, such as a president, like statesman or woman is what I meant to say, such as a president, a prime minister, etc., or even a despot or an autocrat. So it's interesting to me that first we have the rumor that former President Donald Trump wants to announce his candidacy for president sometime this summer, without regard to how that might influence the upcoming November 2022 midterm elections. Remember, Trump's a Gemini Sun conjunct Uranus, so he's ruled by Mercury. And Mercury's ruler, the ruler Mercury, is about to conjoin the Cancer Sun, and that the Cancer Sun is the sun sign of our U.S. Sibley birth chart. So I'm hoping you guys see the resonance there, but it's just rather interesting. And we have also, of course, Elon Musk's recent announcement that he's giving up his mercurial bid to buy Twitter, the most mercurial named of all the social media platforms. And given Jupiter's prominence at the Cancer new moon, it seems a righteous legal battle has now begun to form. It'll be interesting to see how that goes once Jupiter stations retrograde in 2 weeks at the Leo new moon when Mercury squares Uranus on July 28th. So we'll obviously talk more about that next week. However, in the short term, given that the U.S. President Biden is currently in Israel as we speak and making his way to Saudi Arabia, the nation and its leader, Mohammed bin Salman, who's known as MBS, who Biden condemned since the orchestrated October 2nd, 2018 killing of Saudi dissident journalist and columnist Jamal Khashoggi, who wrote for the Washington Post newspaper, there may be something about an agreement on the Saudis loosening up their oil exports now in order to bring down prices in the U.S. and elsewhere. Now, the hypocrisy of this kind of trip on Biden's part, he said previously he would not deal with the Saudis since Khashoggi's death or killing, which was widely condemned, including in his 2020 presidential campaign trail, on his campaign trail, where he publicly vowed to make Saudi Arabia a pariah. It's obvious when in June he said, I'm not going to meet with MBS, that's this June, and then turned around, according to the Washington Post, to defend, quote, his decision to meet with the Saudi crown prince who orchestrated the killing and dismemberment of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, saying the Saudis must be involved in any effort to stabilize a volatile region. And the article goes on, my views on Khashoggi have been absolutely positively clear, and I have never been quiet about talking about human rights, Biden said in response to a question. The reason I'm going to Saudi Arabia is to promote U.S. interests in a way that I think we have an opportunity to reassert our influence in the Middle East. Now, think of that too in context of the Cancer new moon's square to Jupiter, right? There's a little bit of a kind of, am I important? Am I important enough to be listened to? You know, it's a square. It was a tension between how important am I versus, you know, how important do I think I am? Anyway, the article goes on. He noted, he noted that he's talking about aligning with the Saudis with the Israelis in their bid to combat Iran over the long term. So Biden spoke of the collaboration needed to stabilize the region, as I quoted, and to ensure that Iran will never obtain a nuclear weapon, again, according to the Washington Post. He also, quote, wants to make sure, quote, to make sure that we can continue to lead in the region and not create a vacuum that is filled by both Russia and China. And according to the rest of the article, the White House has since confirmed the meeting with MBS, saying that Biden will encounter the Crown Prince as part of a bilateral meeting with Saudi King Salman and the country's broader leadership team. Still, his decision to share space with MBS has been a lightning rod. Khashoggi's fiancée, Hatice I don't know how to pronounce her name. It's Cengiz. So Cengiz condemned Biden's visit. And this is a quote from her. You can imagine how shocked and disappointed I was to learn that you would break your promise and travel to Saudi Arabia to likely meet with the Crown Prince, the person who U.S. intelligence determined was responsible for ordering Jamal's murder, she wrote in an op-ed in the Washington Post. You condemn Russia for persecuting dissidents and committing war crimes in Ukraine. But the Saudis are executing the same horrific human rights abuses. Why are they being given a pass? Is that the price of oil? And the Washington Post publisher, Fred Ryan, the article goes on, chastised Biden for going to Jeddah on bended knee to shake the pariah's blood-stained hand. Ryan wrote that the meeting will signal that American values are negotiable and that Biden is turning a blind eye to Jamal's murder in an effort to lower gasoline prices in advance of this fall's midterms. So I'm wondering now, despite this kind of reaction to what President Biden is attempting to do, which we all know is in part motivated not just by bringing stability and peace to the Middle East region as it wants to face off with Iran, but also to bring down oil prices, that this Mercury Sun conjunction on the 16th may give us some kind of announcement, right? But the reaction is likely to be intense. So whatever it is, you know. Anyway, I want to point out here, too, that we're all still feeling the after effects of the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in Pisces, which exacted on April 12th. And I've noted before such large astrological occurrences, and this one happened last in Pisces 166 years ago, when the world experienced the advent of spiritualism, when two young girls in upstate New York claimed to communicate with spirits they believed were knocking on the walls of their house, and how these astrological occurrences trigger future energies and events. In other words, they don't end when their aspect completes, rather they're simply beginning. Now, if we're looking at personal planets that move very quickly and we're looking at aspects to our natal charts, yes, they may end fairly quickly. They dissipate. Different astrologers have different rules or understandings about how long it takes for the Mercury conjunct your sun or vice versa to, to actually wane that energy. And it's fairly quickly because these planets move quickly. The outer planets, however, are more apt to trigger. But even the moon and the moon's lunations can trigger something that has long-lasting effects. And of course, we all know about eclipses, which we'll be talking about on future shows, since we've got 2 more coming up in the fall, and how their effects can be, last up to years, depending on where they fall in our charts and and how closely they aspect sensitive points. But I'm thinking here in terms of the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in Pisces that it's more relevant to what New York astrologer Michael Luton calls a recurrence of the same energies when the aspects in the sky repeat and or mirror aspects in our natal chart. So in other words, Jupiter aspects Neptune by conjunction in the sign of Pisces only once approximately every 165 or 66 years. All right. If you have a Jupiter Neptune conjunction in Pisces in your chart, that's going to be very heavily triggered. If you have Jupiter conjunct Neptune in another sign, it also might likely trigger you. But anytime an aspect occurs in the sky that mimics the aspect that is present in your natal chart, Michael Luton's theory or hypothesis is that it will trigger that energy and you will have a repeat of an experience, at least on the energetic or metaphysical level, to what you experienced at birth or around the energies into which your soul chose to be born and how you may have chosen to manifest them. So I mentioned the Mars-Pluto square before. Perhaps if you have a Mars-Pluto square in your natal chart, when that energy repeats in the sky, particularly if it's in the same signs, but not necessarily, that you will see some kind of recurrence, somebody with a power control issue, someone who's trying to overpower you in some way or disempower you in some way. Or if you're further along in your spiritual journey, how you might be able to get what you want using your own internal sense of empowerment in a positive way without having to resort to manipulation or cajoling or, fleecing anyone. Now, with this Jupiter, Neptune, and Pisces, for example, after these two girls in New York had been made celebrities by their older, more savvy married sister and taken on the road as a kind of like freak show business, it was eventually revealed that they were faking it. And I talked about this on the previous show back in April, but I'm reminded of it now because the story is that this led to their supposed ability to communicate with spirits who'd crossed into another dimension being labeled a hoax. And they became subsequently completely discredited. So my point here is, where have we heard that word hoax before more recently than the mid-1800s? And can we see how it's been used to falsely declare that the November 2020 U.S. president election was rigged, stolen, or otherwise tampered with through some kind of, to date, completely unproven or factually unproven election fraud? Can we also see how this notion or conspiracy theory has traveled far and wide, spread like water throughout the nation and beyond? Now, we weren't present. I mean, some of us might have been, but in spirit, during the time of the two gals claiming to hear or communicate with these spirits. But I'm thinking that the phenomenon of it must have spread like wildfire in the same way that this has been happening now. And that's the point I'm trying to make. So this time, the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in Pisces has spawned a breakdown in our legal system's ability to protect all kinds of things that are related to Jupiter: citizens' right to vote, women's rights to make choices about their own bodies, issues around equality, not to mention free speech. And so as Mercury again approaches its conjunction to the Cancer Sun, and both Mercury and the Sun were opposed by the Capricorn Moon and waxing toward oppositions to Pluto, that all of this also is occurring or has occurred during the Capricorn new moon, while all these planets mentioned were square to Chiron, wounded healer Chiron at this lunation. So we might surmise that it's this tension between our deep-rooted emotional focus and the need to speak out about past wounds that drives us all now, both individually and collectively. And what adds to the intensity of that are these recent occurrences around the dissolution of previous laws that gave us the right to vote, gave women the right to make choices about their own bodies, gave different races and cultures and religions and genders or gender choice, right? Equality. So there's, like I said, a dissolution of that going on right now. And of course, Pluto in Capricorn is providing its own backdrop, excuse me, of heralding the end as we move toward next March's ingress of Pluto into Aquarius of business as usual. And I've mentioned this before too. We're going to be in a very fluctuating time for that year between March of 2023 and a year and a half. I forget if it's March or April of 2024 or later that Pluto moves permanently into Aquarius for the next 20 years. But that is going to be a rather revolutionary period. So what I'm trying to say again is that this Capricorn full moon, triggered by the original Cancer new moon, that is encouraging us to get in touch with our own self-compassion to the point where we can have the maturity to not be done in by exposing ourselves emotionally to others and or publicly, but rather that this strengthens our case that the outer world will pay attention and be compassionate to us, is that the intensity around all of that will increase, at least in the short term, and begin to take an effect on fighting back against some of the lies, exaggerations, hoaxes, or other manipulations around the legal system, our belief system, about foreigners and immigration and education, which is a whole nother story, and all the things that Jupiter represents that I've already mentioned. So, Venus in Gemini trine Saturn Aquarius leading up to the Capricorn full moon, and that provided us the capability to recognize the difference between obligations to ourselves and our duties to others. So it brought us greater clarity about the difference between the two. And Mercury in Cancer sextile in Uranus, also leading up to the Capricorn full moon, allowed for new insights and revelations related to recognizing what we value most in the world right now. And this may ultimately cause a shift in our perspective toward what we thought we valued most before. And that, in turn, is in perfect alignment with Uranus's longer-term transit through values-oriented Venus-ruled Taurus right now. So through the Capricorn moon's trine to the transiting Taurus North Node and Uranus, which is, as many of you may have already been apprised, is waxing toward an exact conjunction to the Taurus North Node circa August 1st, which we'll talk about next time too, we may make necessary changes to our domestic life. These trine aspects invite us to shake things up a bit in the name of progress and possibly to become an advocate for future change. Meanwhile, the Capricorn moon sextile to the transiting Scorpio South Node at this lunation likewise benefits our ability to seek out opportunities that can help us move successfully through the changes necessary to have or make our voices be heard. Hence, this lunation imbues us with a strong sense of empowerment now, but it also imbues others with a strong sense of empowerment. Now, I mentioned recently that 2 weeks ago or last week, I don't remember, that, the universe doesn't take sides. I mean, the energies are the energies, how we perceive those energies. So I might be empowered, but so might the guy who is in total disagreement with me be empowered about his viewpoints. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, the other thing is that, when it comes to empowerment, it's especially true because the moon in general, and particularly the moon in Cancer, when we had the Cancer lunation, is indicative of females as well as family. So that this, time provides the opportunity for greater empowerment through heating Capricorn's entreaties to grip those reins tightly through a sense of greater self-empowerment now. And again, it's emotional intensity that rules the day now. Between the July 1st Mars square to Pluto, when the Moon-Pluto conjunction occurred yesterday and early this morning, and as Mercury joins the Sun on the 16th, opposes Pluto on the 18th, and the Cancer Sun opposes Pluto on the 19th, we are likely going to see a lot of pushback, but, in exactly what realm remains to be seen. There's likelihood is that these are Cancer to Capricorn aspects. And Mars was, of course, in Aries. So, Jupiter is in Aries. There's a lot of fight in this stuff. It also pays to remember that in mundane astrology, the moon represents the people. And it helps to understand that the United States, as I mentioned before, was born with a Cancer sun. So we might extrapolate that this Cancer full moon occurring during such a politically fraught environment represents the growing sense of power by females within the collective. Yay! But again, doesn't come without its opposition by others who are, shall we just say, anti-female, anti-feminine divine, anti-cycles of nature, whether they know it or not. So, Moon-Pluto combinations, Mercury-Pluto combinations, Sun-Pluto combinations, especially the hard aspects, which include the conjunction, can signify obsession. So we might conclude, again, given the current climate, not only with the within the U.S., but elsewhere as well, that women's rights are humans' rights. There's a budding sense that when we, the people, fixate Moon Pluto, Mercury Pluto, Sun Pluto on a goal, Capricorn, they're more likely to achieve their goal than not. And such a focus becomes more acute when we realize that both luminaries, as I said before, were square the wounded healer Chiron and Aries. Now, Chiron and Aries is going to station retrograde next week on July 19th, and that's right after Mercury enters Leo. So, again, just to backtrack for a second, it's like our intense focus on past wounding as the Capricorn moon reflects the Cancer Sun's shadow side tendency to hide when hurt becomes obvious. So the Cap moon Plutos and the rest of the Pluto aspects messages scream loud and clear now. It's time to show, tell, or otherwise reveal to the world our pain, to stop hiding it, and to demand that others not only listen, but react by doing something to help us all heal. And again, the Mercury and Sun oppositions to Pluto will further intensify our obsession with this matter. So, the key was not to get caught up in, as I mentioned when I first started the show, what perfected today, the recent Venus and Gemini square to Neptune and Pisces, by getting confused, particularly about mis and disinformation out there. It must not be unrealistically assumed that whatever we set our minds to now will miraculously happen by ignoring unsubstantiated opinions of others without reading the fine print and or fact-checking what might turn out to be, as I just said, dis, or propagandist information designed to disempower rather than empower us now. And that's why, again, we're asked to release our uber sensitivity and tendency to hide when hurt, and instead, through having achieved a greater sense of true self-compassion since the advent of the Cancer new moon, to focus on building a plan whereby we can take the reins, as I said. So, you know, we had a plethora of sextiles at the Cancer new moon that helped us with this. And now, as I mentioned, Mercury will move into Leo on July 19th, which I think will give us also the ability to speak out more loudly and proudly. And before that happens, Venus moves into Cancer on July 17th. And that will make us more concerned about Cancerian topics, which of course go right back to what we've been talking about, the intuition with the body, the natural cycles, the feminine wisdom of the feminine divine, right? And Mercury moving into Leo 2 days later is going to give us the opportunity to speak out about these things. And when Chiron stations retrograde also on July 19th in the sign of Aries, we're going to go inward. We're going to start to look at bridging the gap, integrating the gap between where we're conscious of our wounding and where we're unconscious. So in other words, if we can become conscious of the derivation of our wounds, we may be able to use that information to help us heal rather than to perpetuate a feeling of woundedness that just goes on and on and on and never gets resolved. So this gives us that opportunity to do the deep work, to do some of the healing of our inner child, right? Because as I mentioned sort of at the beginning, you know, the whole Capricorn full moon is about tasking our inner child to become more responsible. And the Chiron retrograde can help us to do that by understanding on a more metaphorical, psychic, intuitive, meditative level where those things that we are cognizant now of that wounded us in the past, what is their derivation and how have we used them to protect ourselves in ways that perhaps in combination with all of these other astrological energies we should now let go of. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining me today. I do hope that you found this information presented here helpful as you continue your karmic evolution in this lifetime. Please be sure to join me next week on July 21st for another episode of Karmic Evolutions, Astrologically Speaking. Until then, may your journey be filled with karmic healing and the joy of greater consciousness. Namaste.
Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time it had no hope. Free to come and free to go. Free to come and free to go. Open up the book.